Before we get started, I'm using a piece of software called VRS because it's free, and there's a paid version, but I'm using a free one for now because I'm only just dived into telemetry and I didn't want to spend a lot of money on something that may not be beneficial. But I have found it beneficial, and this is why I wanted to give you guys a bit more information, get you going, see if you can find it beneficial too. I'm by no means sponsored by VRS or endorsing them, but this is just the one I happen to use, so this is the one we're going to use as an example. There are many others out there, so do your research and look and find one that may suit you. So once you've completed a session in iracing and VRS uploads the data, you come to a kind of a splash screen like this. On the left, the blue here is the data pack, or VRS's kind of in-house driving team, their lap times. And you can see here, he was doing 128.287, and that's an average lap time. It's kind of depressingly enough. My fastest lap time was 129.996. So there's an opportunity to gain about 1.7 seconds. That's great. Plenty of opportunity for me to gain. Now, looking at the results from the previous races in the Ferrari 296 series on iRacing, I need to be in the 128s to be competitive. So I've got to my work cut out here. Once you are ready to get going, you click Analyze Line, and then it brings you to this page. And for now, don't worry about this. I want you to concentrate on the left side of the screen and on the top. Looking at the top, you've got a ticker up here, which shows you turn by turn everywhere where you're losing time. Now, there are some places where you're losing very little time, like I'm losing very little time in turn 3. But then in like turn 5 and 6, I'm losing a lot of time. The negative means the blue time is faster than your time. And here, again, the blue information is the data pack, the red is yours. So you can see I'm losing a lot of time in this sector here. And that's where I'm going to concentrate my efforts. Your efforts may differ depending where you're quicker and slower. So you can click up here on turn 5, turn 6, and it brings you to the turns. It now shows you the data on the right. So that's all that data for this section, and this the driving line, etc., etc. Same thing can happen for turn 7 and turn 8 and 9. But for now, we're going to concentrate turn 5 and 6. So the right side can look very scary. There's a lot of information, but we're going to concentrate on 3 main items. We're going to look at speed, throttle, and brake. On the left side, we're going to look at driving line. We're going to look at gear. And then if you want to, you can stare at these things and see where you might be different. Your steering is going to update based on the steering input, and your clutch and brake and gas are also going to update. But I don't really find the need for this because this is copied over here. So what's the first thing I look at? First thing I look at is brake, down here, my brake information. As I said, the red line is my information and the blue line is the data pack information. So where are we different? I look for the big differences. Little differences like this, yes, they do make a difference to your lap time, but I want to do the big easy chunks for now versus the small nitty gritty. I might look at this later in the week, but for now, I'm concentrating all my effort here. So what's happening? As I'm coming into this hairpin, you can see my brake trace comes on ahead of the blue brake trace. What does that mean? It basically means I'm braking too early. This is time to the right, and this is brake pressure vertically. I'm braking too early. There's a gap here. You can see I'm braking too early. This is also represented by the throttle up here because the throttle is coming off early. That's fine. If I fix the brake down here, I fix the throttle up here. That's if you're doing proper brake and throttle technique. So what's happening? I'm braking early, as I said, but I'm also braking harder. My initial braking coming into this corner is nearly at 100% versus the data pack, which is 75-80%. They're staying out of the ABS, whereas I'm hitting it hard initially. I'm also trailing off way earlier than there. You can see that gap there. And they're also holding the brake longer. I'm coming off early, so I'm braking initially early and hard and trailing off early. Whereas they're braking a little bit more gentle slightly later and holding that before trailing off. And then there's a little bit here which is a nitty gritty detail about something for another video. But anyway, if you look at the top, the third item, speed up here, you can see here to here, which is represented by this section here, my red line is lower than the blue line. That means I'm not carrying as much speed into the corner under braking. Now this here is kind of like nitty gritty stuff, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. But you can see there's a big discrepancy here, and that basically means because I'm braking early and hard, I'm scrubbing a lot of speed, which could be good, but in this instance is not good. So that's how you use braking, and that's going to get you pretty much to here. That initial braking and turn in, again the car rotated. This little bit here of braking will get the car rotated better because you're going to have pressure on and weight on the front wheels, which will help them bite into the surface more, allowing the car to rotate and get around the corner. So that's why I said we'll look into that a little later. We figured out the kind of braking, we've looked at it, we see where we're going wrong. We know now, coming into the next session, we need to brake later and gentler, but hold that 75% brake for longer. So instead of releasing maybe here, we're going to release here. And I'll back that up by using this timeline down, or this little kind of timeline tool here. So you can see I'm braking at this point here, whereas he starts braking at this point here. So that's just an example, and we can delve into it a little more detail. For example, we can say I'm starting to come off the brakes at this point, whereas he's starting to come off the brakes at this point. So you can see there's big gaps there, and that's pretty much a great visualization of braking and the technique that goes into it. So we figured out braking to an extent. We know we need to change some stuff, and we can figure that out. The next step is throttle. What do we do with throttle? So we're going to look at the throttle here, and we basically do the same thing. You can see here I'm on the throttle a little earlier than he is. My throttle is a little wavy, it's all over the place, and I don't get up to 100% throttle until much later than he does. You can see there's a big gap here where he's much more throttle, and he's at 100% throttle earlier than I am. He's here, whereas I'm here. He also, if you look at the brake trace, I'm kind of wobbling around here, just kind of second guessing my acceleration, no confidence in just putting my foot down. Whereas he's very much more direct. He's up to 75% and then kind of holds it and then increases it as the car gains speed. So that's another thing to look out for is I'm accelerating a little early here. So if I just leave the car rotate and straighten up a little bit and then go hard on the accelerator, I'll gain time. Now, this section here, again, kind of same deal here. I'm coming up in a very progressive linear fashion, whereas he's kind of stepping it. So that's another thing to look out for. But you can see here, at this section, we're both off the throttle at pretty much the exact same points, which is good. That's a good point, and that's one thing to kind of reinforce is telemetry is not always about where you're doing things wrong. It's where you're doing things right. That you can say, okay, I know that point. That's a good reference point. I won't change that. The other thing that you can look out for is gears. If you're ever in a situation where you're unsure of whether to be in first gear or second gear or third gear, let's say for a corner, you can scroll through here and see when the gears change and what gears are for what corners, especially when you got corners that are back to back and hairpins. You can see, because sometimes you might have an instance where you'll say, I'm not sure if I want to be in second or third. Second might allow the car to rotate more, but third gets me a better traction out of the corner. So which do I prefer? And you can practice and keep an eye on that delta bar, but this will give you a much better indication of which gear to be in. So quick recap on the right side. throttle, brake, speed. That's really all you have to worry about for now. As I said, this is introductory and basic. Look for big gaps. Look for where you're doing things differently. And look for where you're doing things well. You can see here my braking is not terrible here. I need to work in a little bit, but this could also be session dependent, because gaps where there's small gaps could be because I was doing this in an official practice. They were doing possibly optimal settings. So also bear that in mind. The last thing I look at is my driving line. And you can see here my driving line. There's a couple of areas where there's a few areas where those things are not quite right. You can see my entry is much later than his. I'm tighter at the apex, and then I run wider on exit. Essentially what he's doing, and I'm going to over exaggerate this, is creating a V. And what I'm doing is creating a very shallow U. Again, I over exaggerated that on purpose. Now, in isolation, the U might be better if this was a long straight, but we know it's not, because it's turn 5 and 6, so we know there's a corner right after. So we need to zoom into turn 6. If we zoom in, my wider exit from the last corner has compromised my entry into this corner. You can see here, he is much wider and creates a much shallower line. He also runs wider than I do. And you can see I'm losing time here because I'm having to slow down more to get the car rotated. And because I'm slowing down more, it's harder for me to get on the accelerator because I'm waiting for the car to rotate. These are just little things to keep an eye on when you're analyzing, but it's a great indicator that a small change of just trying to keep the car tight here can make a big difference to how you approach the next corner. So just one of those little things to keep an eye on. I hope this was a very basic introductory. I hope it was simple enough for everyone to understand. I hope you learned something from it. I hope you can gain lap time from it, because I'm hoping I can gain lap time from this analysis myself. But don't be afraid of the telemetry. You break it down section by section. Once you've learned more about throttle and brake and speed, you can start looking into things like line distance, which is essentially just this. It's the deviation between the optimal line versus your line. And then steering angle, or how much steering angle you're putting on and when versus the other person. So you might be not turning hard enough. And as you can see here, I'm turning a little too late, which is, again, just reinforced by the other data we have. There are other tools. They have more information. And you can, when you get very close to other lines, you, like, let's say you're here, you can look at the nitty gritty. And you can look at all the little areas where you're just a little bit off, and that could be the difference. So like for example, it may not be, but we'll look at this one where I'm about a tenth of a second slower. If it loads. Now I do have a slightly different driving line. I'm coming in a little shallower, as you can see here, and I'm coming out a little shallower, or sorry, the other way around. And my brake trace here is all over the place. My throttle is all over the place, and my brake is all over the place. But it's working. There's only a tenth of a difference, but that tenth of a difference could be huge when you're trying to gain tenths. But also, if you're trying to gain seconds, not the first place I would look. But I hope, again, this was helpful and informative. I hope you can try and take this forward and learn and utilize it. And go down the rabbit hole if you want and learn from other people who are better at explaining it and have more information. And, yeah, that is just the high level overview of telemetry. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you can support the channel by liking, subscribing. Leave a comment down below if you have any other suggestions or tips on how to read this data, or for anyone else that's watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe. It's a great way to support the channel. And if you do use a telemetry software and you do find it helpful, try and support the people who make the software and subscribe to their program. Hope you guys enjoy this video. I'll see you in the next one, and hopefully it's a good race at OK Amber this week.